That old Gibson J200 wasn't just a guitar, it was 3 years of my life, distilled into gleaming wood and rich tone. Every double shift at the hospital, every skipped outing, every extra hour felt worth it when I saw that honeyburst finish. To me, it wasn't just an instrument, it was a symbol of dedication, a testament to hard work. My sister, Emily, never quite understood that kind of passion. She and her husband, Mark, a hedge fund manager who measured success in luxury cars and designer watches, lived a different life. Their son, Leo, now 10, had always known a world where everything was simply given to him, multiple iPads, a gaming computer that outshone professional setups, a closet full of clothes worn once and then discarded. Our family gatherings usually started pleasantly enough. Mom's famous pot roast could thaw even the coldest moods, and Dad always had a story from his construction days in Denver. But then Emily would arrive, invariably late, with Mark trailing behind, laden with shopping bags from stores I only window shopped. Leo would burst through the door, usually demanding dessert before a single greeting. I remember Emily, scrolling through her phone, saying, "Give your aunt a hug first," almost as an afterthought. Leo just glanced at me, a dismissive look he usually reserved for furniture, then wandered off towards the kitchen. I'd stopped expecting warmth from him years ago. He was a kid raised to believe the world revolved around him, common courtesy apparently beneath his station. Dinner conversation would inevitably orbit around Mark's latest business acquisition or Emily's upcoming spa retreat in Nevada. No one ever asked about my promotion, or the charity concert I just organized for the children's ward. When Dad tried to mention my recent newspaper recognition for volunteer work, Emily cut him off, eager to show off pictures of her gold-plated resort bathroom fixtures. "Can you imagine?" she'd gush, zooming in on her phone. After dinner, I made the mistake of stepping away from the adults, heading out to my car to grab my guitar. I'd planned to play a few songs for my parents, a tradition we shared. Music had always been my language with them, especially Dad, who grew up on country legends. But as I pulled the case from the trunk, it felt wrong. Lighter than it should have been. My stomach dropped before my brain could even catch up. I carried it inside, my hands trembling, already knowing. The latches clicked open with their familiar sound, but the sight inside made my vision swim. My Gibson was destroyed. The neck, snapped clean off, hung at an unnatural angle, held only by the strings. The body was scarred with deep gouges, as if someone had deliberately carved into the wood. The headstock was cracked, tuning pegs ripped out, and pieces of abalone inlay were missing. This wasn't an accident. This was systematic, focused destruction. "What's wrong, honey?" Mom appeared beside me, her face draining of color as she saw the guitar. The commotion drew everyone else. Dad's confusion quickly turned to rage. Emily looked mildly curious, while Mark just seemed annoyed at the interruption to his cigar. "Who did this?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely there. Just then, Leo walked past. I saw fresh scratches on his hands. He was clutching a limited edition Swiss Army knife I recognized as Mark's, easily worth thousands. "Leo," I said slowly, "did you go into my car?" He shrugged. "It wasn't locked. I wanted to see what was inside." "Did you do this to my guitar?" "It made funny sounds when I hit it," he replied with complete indifference. The wood was easy to scratch, too. I wanted to see what was under the shiny stuff. The room went silent. I waited for Emily or Mark to react, to show some horror. Instead, Emily sighed, like I was being overdramatic. "Leo, you shouldn't play with other people's things," she said, in the same tone you'd use to comment on the weather. "That's it?" I stared at my sister. "Your son just destroyed a $12,000 guitar, and that's your response?" Mark scoffed. $12,000 for a guitar? That's absurd. Nobody pays that much for a wooden box with strings. "It's a 1968 Gibson J200, I said through gritted teeth. "It's a collector's item, a professional instrument. Your son deliberately smashed it to pieces." "He's just a child," Emily interjected, her tone sharpening. "He didn't know it was expensive." "You're blowing this completely out of proportion. He's 10 years old, not 3. And look at the damage. This wasn't curiosity, he systematically destroyed it." Dad stepped forward, his face flushed. "That boy needs to be disciplined, and you two need to pay for the guitar." Mark actually laughed. "We're not paying $12,000 because your daughter is careless enough to leave expensive items in an unlocked car." "It was locked." I shot back. "I always lock my car." "Clearly not," Emily said. "Otherwise Leo wouldn't have been able to get in. This is really your own fault for being careless." Mom gasped. "Emily, how can you say that? Your son damaged her property. And I'm sure she has insurance or something. Besides, you're supposed to forgive family, right? That's what you always taught us growing up. Forgiveness and family come first." Her words landed like a physical blow. She was using our parents' values as a weapon, twisting them to avoid accountability. Leo stood there, smirking, clearly enjoying the chaos he'd created. He knew exactly what he'd done, and he knew his parents would shield him. "So, that's how it is," I said quietly. "Family means I should just accept that your son destroyed something irreplaceable, and asking for basic accountability makes me the villain?" "You're being melodramatic," Mark dismissed. "It's a guitar. Get over it." I looked at my parents, hoping for support, but Mom seemed uncertain. Dad, despite his anger, looked defeated. Emily had always been his favorite, the daughter who'd married well, and lived the life he'd wanted for both of us. I was the one who'd chosen a modest career helping people instead of chasing wealth. "Fine," I said, closing the guitar case. "I understand perfectly." Emily smiled, believing she'd won. "I knew you'd be reasonable about this. Family has to stick together." I didn't respond. I simply picked up the case, kissed my mother's cheek, and left without another word. The drive home was a blur of fury and heartbreak. That guitar was more than an instrument, it represented my dreams, my hard work, my identity as a musician. Leo had destroyed it for entertainment, and my own family had sided with him. My apartment felt hollow. The music room, usually my sanctuary, now mocked me with its silence. I placed the destroyed case on my workbench. Opening it again felt like examining a corpse, but I needed to document the damage for insurance. I photographed every angle, cataloging each scratch, each crack, each missing piece of inlay. The neck hung at a sickening angle, the break so complete that splinters jutted out. Leo hadn't just damaged it, he'd brutalized it with methodical precision. The gouges followed deliberate patterns, as if he'd been testing how deeply the knife could penetrate. My phone buzzed. A text from mom, asterisk, please don't be angry with your sister. She's under a lot of stress with Leo. Maybe you could talk to her tomorrow when everyone's calmed down, asterisk, my blood pressure spiked. Under stress? What about the stress of working extra shifts to afford something meaningful, only to have it destroyed by a spoiled child whose parents refuse to parent? What about my feelings, my loss, my right to basic respect? I didn't reply. Instead, I called my insurance company. The agent sounded sympathetic. Do you have documentation of the guitar's value? She asked. Purchase receipt, authentication papers, a recent appraisal. I can email everything over. That would be helpful. I have to tell you, though, based on what you're describing, if the damage was intentional, we'll need to involve law enforcement. Deliberate destruction by a family member can complicate the claim. The child who did it is 10 years old. The agent paused. That does complicate things. We'll need a police report regardless. Someone will contact you within 48 hours to schedule an inspection. After hanging up, I sat in silence. Filing an insurance claim meant officially reporting Leo's actions. It meant potential legal consequences for a 10-year-old. Part of me recoiled, he was family, and so young. But another part, the part that had been dismissed and invalidated all evening, whispered that consequences were exactly what Leo needed. His parents certainly weren't providing them. I pulled up my notes app and started writing. Every detail, what time we arrived, Leo's scratches, his exact words about the guitar, Emily's dismissive response, Mark's mocking laughter. If this was going to be official, I wanted my recollection documented while it was fresh. Around midnight, Emily called. I watched her name flash on the screen, letting it go to voicemail. She called again 5 minutes later. Then again. On the 4th attempt, I answered. What do you want? Don't hang up, please. I need to talk to you about what happened. There's nothing to talk about. Your son destroyed my property. You refused to take responsibility. The conversation is over. You're making this into such a bigger deal than it needs to be, Emily said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she used when trying to manipulate. Leo feels terrible about what happened. Does he? Because he seemed pretty pleased with himself when I saw him. He's upstairs crying right now. Mark had to take away his Xbox because he was so upset. The absurdity almost made me laugh. So, his punishment for destroying a $12,000 guitar is losing video game privileges? For how long? A whole day. You don't understand how sensitive he is. Harsh punishments don't work with Leo. We have to use positive reinforcement and natural consequences. Natural consequences, I repeated flatly. Like what? The natural consequence of smashing someone's guitar is that they get upset? How terrible for Leo to witness the results of his own actions. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're being sarcastic and mean when I'm trying to have a genuine conversation. Emily, I'm going to say this once, and then I'm hanging up. Your son deliberately destroyed something that took me 3 years to save for, something irreplaceable. Your response was to blame me, mock the value of what was lost, and tell me I should just get over it, because family forgives. You taught Leo tonight that actions don't have consequences as long as mommy and daddy are there to make excuses. That's not fair. I filed an insurance claim. They require a police report for intentional damage. Tomorrow, officers are going to want to talk to Leo about what he did. The silence on the other end stretched. You called the police on a 10-year-old child? I called my insurance company about a destroyed $12,000 instrument. They're the ones requiring a police report. This is what happens in the real world when you destroy other people's property. I can't believe you would do this to family. I can't believe you're surprised. You made it clear tonight that my feelings and my loss don't matter. Well, insurance companies don't care about your excuses or your family dynamics. They care about facts and documentation. Emily's voice rose to a near shriek. You're going to give my son a criminal record over a stupid guitar? That stupid guitar was worth more than some people make in 3 months. And Leo won't get a criminal record, he's a juvenile first offender. But maybe, just maybe, having to talk to police officers will teach him that actions have consequences. Mark is going to lose his mind when he hears about this. Mark can join you in not caring what I think. I'm done with this conversation. I hung up and immediately called my parents' landline. Mom answered, her voice groggy. Honey, it's almost 1 in the morning. What's wrong? I need you to block Emily from calling me through you and Dad. She's harassing me about the insurance claim, and I can't deal with her right now. Oh, sweetheart. Mom sighed heavily. She already called here twice. Your father told her to leave you alone and let everyone calm down. I'll make sure she knows not to use our phone to reach you. Thank you. I'm sorry for waking you. Don't apologize. Try to get some sleep, okay? After we hung up, exhaustion finally crashed over me. I was 32, a nurse manager at a major hospital, and I'd just been reduced to asking my parents to run interference like a teenager avoiding drama. The next morning, I woke with gritty eyes and a pounding headache. Sleep had come in fits and starts, interrupted by dreams of shattered wood and my sister's dismissive laughter. The destroyed guitar case still sat on my workbench like an accusation. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. The insurance company wouldn't contact me for at least another day. The police report could wait until I had more energy. For now, I just needed to process and figure out my next move. That's when the idea started forming. Not fully developed yet, just a whisper. Emily had said I should forgive. That family came first. That material possessions didn't matter as much as relationships. What if I applied those exact principles to something Mark valued? I spent the late morning researching, going down internet rabbit holes about car detailing, temporary vandalism, and reversible damage. The goal crystallized gradually: create the exact same level of violation and distress I'd experienced, while keeping everything technically fixable. A lesson, not genuine destruction. By noon, I had a shopping list. By 1, I had everything I needed. My shift didn't start until the next day, giving me the entire afternoon and evening to prepare. The plan was simple, calculated, and perfectly proportionate. If a $12,000 guitar was just a wooden box with strings, then Mark's $100,000 Mercedes was just metal and plastic with wheels. I went to bed that night with everything ready. The supplies sat in my car trunk. The timeline was set. Tomorrow morning, before sunrise, I would teach my family exactly what their philosophy of consequence-free forgiveness actually looked like. Mark's Mercedes SL65 AMG was his pride and joy. Custom ordered just 6 months ago for over $100,000. It was gleaming black perfection. He'd spent 20 minutes talking about it at dinner, even scolding Leo for fingerprints on the window. The next morning, I woke at 5:30, dressed in dark clothes, and drove to my parents' house. The neighborhood was silent, most people still sleeping on this Sunday morning. Mark and Emily were staying the weekend. Mom had mentioned they'd extended their visit because Leo wanted to use my parents' pool. I arrived at 6:15, early enough that the sun hadn't fully risen. Mark's Mercedes was parked in the same spot as Friday night. I'd stopped at a hardware store yesterday afternoon, purchasing the items I needed. Nothing illegal, nothing that would cause permanent damage, just enough to make a point. The valve stem tool cost $3. Removing the caps from all 4 tires took less than a minute. Letting the air out took slightly longer, but I had time. The car settled onto its rims with a satisfying deflation, the expensive suspension compressing under the weight. Next came the washable paint markers, the kind children use. Across the windshield, in large bright letters, I wrote, "He's just a car. You're supposed to forgive." The hood received similar treatment. Nobody needs a $100,000 car anyway. On the driver's side door, family comes first. Get over it. The bologna came in a family-sized package, 48 slices of processed meat that I carefully placed across every painted surface of the car. The acidity would eat into the clear coat if left long enough, creating permanent spots. I knew this because Mark had once lectured everyone for 15 minutes about protecting luxury car paint. For the final touch, I used sardine oil I drained from several cans, pouring it carefully into the air intake vents. The smell would permeate the entire ventilation system, almost impossible to eliminate without replacing multiple components. I stepped back to admire my work. The Mercedes looked ridiculous, covered in bologna and childish messages, sitting on 4 flat tires in the early morning light. It was perfect. I drove home, showered, changed into clean clothes, and waited. My phone started ringing at 7:45. Mark's number flashed on the screen, but I didn't answer. He called 6 more times in rapid succession before Emily tried. I ignored her, too. Mom called next, her voice panicked on the voicemail, "Honey, please call me back. Mark is absolutely furious about his car. He's threatening to call the police. Please, we need to talk about this." I waited until noon before driving back to my parents' house. The scene was exactly what I'd expected. Mark stood next to his defiled Mercedes, his face purple with rage. Emily was crying, her perfectly applied makeup streaking. Dad looked torn between anger and something that might have been pride. Mom was wringing her hands, distressed. Leo was nowhere to be seen. Probably inside playing video games. "You're insane," Mark shouted the moment he saw me. "Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost to fix?" "Fix?" I asked innocently. "Why would you need to fix it? It's just a car. Nobody needs a $100,000 car anyway." His face somehow turned an even deeper shade of red. "That's completely different. This is deliberate vandalism." Leo's destruction of my guitar was deliberate, too. I watched him show no remorse whatsoever. "He's a child," Emily shrieked. "You're a grown adult who should know better." "Exactly," I replied calmly. "I am an adult who knows better." I know that actions have consequences. I know that expensive things should be respected and protected. I know that family doesn't mean accepting mistreatment without standing up for yourself. This is mistreatment. Mark gestured wildly at his car. You destroyed my Mercedes. I haven't destroyed anything. The paint will wash off. The tires just need air. The Bologna might leave some spots, but nothing that can't be buffed out with enough professional attention. Unlike my guitar, which is completely beyond repair. You can buy another guitar, Emily said desperately. But Mark's car was custom ordered. The paint is a special color. The interior is bespoke. You can't just replace that. The irony was so thick, I almost laughed. My guitar was a 1968 Gibson J200. They don't make them anymore. It was irreplaceable in every sense of the word. But according to you yesterday, I'm supposed to just forgive and forget because family comes first. Mom stepped forward, her voice pleading. Can't we all just calm down and work this out? Fighting won't solve anything. There's nothing to work out, Mom. Yesterday, I learned that family means accepting whatever happens to you without complaint. Emily made it very clear that asking for accountability or consequences makes you unreasonable. That's not what I said. Emily protested weakly. Yes, it is. You said Leo is just a child who didn't know better. You said I was being melodramatic. You said I should forgive him because family sticks together. You refused to take any responsibility for your son's actions or offer any compensation for what he destroyed. I turned to Mark. So, I'm applying those same principles here. I'm just a person who didn't know better. You're being melodramatic about some washable paint and flat tires. You should forgive me because family sticks together. And really, this is your own fault for parking such an expensive car in an unlocked driveway where anyone could mess with it. The silence stretched. Mark's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Emily's tears had stopped, replaced by a dawning realization of exactly how her own words sounded when reflected back at her. This is completely different. Mark finally managed. How? I challenged. Explain to me exactly how it's different. Because my car is worth real money. So was my guitar. $12,000 is real money to me, even if it's pocket change to you. Actually, the insurance appraisal valued it at $18,000, but I'm only asking for what I originally paid since that seems more fair. Dad cleared his throat. She's got a point. Stay out of this, Dad. Mark snapped. Don't talk to my father that way, I said sharply. You come into his home, let your son destroy my property, refuse to take responsibility, and now you're disrespecting him when he tries to mediate? Emily grabbed Mark's arm. Maybe we should just go. Not until she agrees to pay for the damages to my car, Mark insisted. I crossed my arms. I'll make you a deal. I'll pay for every cent of damage to your Mercedes if you pay for my guitar. Fair is fair. Your guitar wasn't worth $12,000, Mark argued, but his voice had lost some certainty. From my purse, I pulled out the documentation I'd printed that morning: purchase receipt, authentication certificate, insurance appraisal, recent auction results for similar instruments. I handed the papers to Mark and watched his face pale. This says it was appraised at $15,000 last year, he said weakly. Values have gone up. Vintage Gibsons in that condition are increasingly rare. The insurance company valued it at $18,000 in my current policy, but I'm only asking for the $12,000 I originally paid. Emily snatched the papers, scanning them frantically. This can't be right. Nobody pays this much for a guitar. Professional musicians do. Collectors do. People who understand the value of craftsmanship and heritage, too. Just because you don't understand something doesn't make it worthless. Mom looked over Emily's shoulder and gasped. Oh, honey, I had no idea it was worth so much. I told you yesterday. You chose not to believe me. Mark pulled out his phone, presumably to call his insurance company or a lawyer. I waited patiently while he had a heated conversation about vandalism coverage and police reports. When he hung up, his expression had shifted from rage to calculation. My insurance will cover the car repairs, but I'll have to pay a $5,000 deductible. Plus, the adjuster said the Bologna acid etching might require a complete repaint, which could total the car given its custom specifications. That sounds expensive, I said sympathetically. Almost like having something valuable deliberately destroyed is actually a big deal. I want to press charges, Mark stated. Go ahead. I'll press charges against Leo for the guitar. We can let the court sort out who owes what to whom. Emily's face went white. You wouldn't. He's just a child. A child who committed felony destruction of property. In this state, the threshold for felony criminal mischief is $1,000. Leo exceeded that by a factor of 12. Even as a juvenile, he faces serious consequences. You're bluffing, Mark said, but he didn't sound convinced. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I already spoke with a lawyer this morning. Would you like to see the consultation summary? He was very interested in the case, especially when I mentioned the parents refused to take any responsibility. Dad stepped between us. All right, enough. This has gone too far on both sides. Has it? I looked at my father steadily. Because from where I'm standing, I've only done exactly what was done to me. The difference is I can undo what I did to Mark's car. He can get it cleaned, repaired, and restored. Leo destroyed something that can never be replaced, and nobody in this family seemed to care until it affected someone they considered important. The truth of that statement hung in the air. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and Dad's shoulders slumped. They both knew I was right. Emily found her voice, smaller now and lacking its earlier confidence. What do you want from us? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to teach your son that destroying other people's property is wrong, regardless of whether he thinks it's fun or interesting. I want an apology that actually means something, not just empty words designed to make the situation go away. And the money? Mark asked. I want my $12,000 for the guitar. You can pay it directly, or we can involve insurance companies, lawyers, and police reports. Your choice. Mark and Emily exchanged a long look. Some silent communication passed between them before Mark pulled out his phone again. I'll transfer the money now, but this makes us even. No more revenge. No more dramatics. I'm not the one who started this, I reminded him. But yes, payment for the guitar settles the debt. He tapped on his phone for a minute, and mine buzzed with a notification. $12,000 deposited into my account. I verified the transaction before nodding. Thank you. For what? It's worth. The car damage is entirely superficial, except possibly the paint etching. Any detailing shop can handle the bologna removal, and the paint markers are water-soluble. You'll need to replace the cabin air filter because of the sardine oil, but everything else is fixable. Mark's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. Emily had started crying again, though whether from relief or humiliation, I couldn't tell. What about Leo? Mom asked quietly. He needs to understand what he did wrong. That's for his parents to handle, I said, though if I were them, I'd be seriously reconsidering the lessons he's learning about respect and consequences. Emily wiped her eyes. I'll talk to him. Will you? Or will you tell him that his aunt is mean and unfair, and that he didn't really do anything wrong? She flinched at the accuracy of my guess. I'll actually talk to him. I promise. I didn't believe her, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I'd made my point in a way that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Whether they chose to learn from it was up to them. The next few days passed in relative silence. Mark's Mercedes was towed to a specialty detailing shop that charged him $3,000 for emergency paint correction and interior decontamination. The manager called it the worst case of deliberate vandalism he'd seen in 20 years. Mom reached out tentatively, asking if I wanted to come over for Sunday dinner. Just her and Dad, nobody else. I accepted, curious to hear what they really thought. Dad was grilling chicken when I arrived. Mom had made her famous potato salad and baked beans. We ate on the back patio, the same place where Leo had probably found Mark's knife just days earlier. Your sister is very upset, Mom said eventually, pushing beans around her plate. I imagine she is. She feels like you attacked her family. That you went after Mark's car specifically to hurt her through him. That's exactly what I did, I agreed. Just like Leo attacked my guitar specifically because it was mine and he thought destroying it would be fun. Dad set down his fork. What you did was risky. If Mark had pressed charges, you could have ended up with a criminal record. And if I pressed charges against Leo, he would have a juvenile record. We both had leverage. The difference is I was willing to use mine. It could have blown up your whole family, Mom said softly. The family blew up the moment everyone sided with a child who deliberately destroyed my property. I just made sure the explosion hit everyone equally instead of just me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I should have supported you better. When I saw that guitar, I knew it was serious. But Emily started crying and saying you were trying to ruin Leo's life, and I didn't want my daughters fighting. So, you stayed neutral, which meant supporting Emily by default. I know, she whispered. I'm sorry. Dad cleared his throat. I'm not sorry you did what you did. That boy needed to learn a lesson, and his parents sure as hell weren't going to teach him. Helen, come on. Mom looked shocked. You've been saying for years that Emily spoils Leo rotten. The kid has no discipline, no manners, no concept of consequences. What happened was inevitable. The only question was whose property he destroyed first. The bluntness of Dad's assessment hung in the air. Mom didn't argue, which told me she agreed, even if she didn't want to admit it. Mark called me yesterday, Dad continued. Wanted to know if I talked to you about apologizing for the car. I told him that apologies work both ways. And until Leo apologized to you for the guitar, he could forget about getting anything from you. What did he say? Hung up on me. Then Emily called crying, saying I was choosing you over her and my own grandson. I told her that respecting people's property isn't about choosing sides. It's about basic human decency. I felt a lump forming in my throat. Thank you for standing up for me. Should have done it sooner. Should have shut down Emily's excuses the night it happened instead of letting you walk out alone. We finished dinner in more comfortable silence. As I helped clear the dishes, Mom pulled me aside. Emily asked if you'd be willing to let Leo apologize. In person, with both parents present. Why? So they can control what he says and make sure it's appropriately sanitized? Maybe. But maybe it's also a genuine attempt at making things right. I considered the request. Part of me wanted to refuse purely out of spite, but refusing would make me just as stubborn and unreasonable as Mark. Fine, but it happens here at your house, with you and Dad present. I don't trust Emily not to turn it into some ambush where I'm supposed to apologize to Leo for traumatizing him. That's fair, Mom agreed. The apology meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday. I arrived early, wanting to talk with my parents before Emily's family showed up. Dad made coffee while I sat at the kitchen table, trying to calm my nerves. You don't have to do this if you're not ready, he said, sliding a mug across to me. I'm not sure I'll ever be ready, but avoiding them forever isn't realistic either. Emily's BMW pulled up exactly on time. Through the window, I watched her and Mark have what appeared to be an intense conversation with Leo in the back seat. The boy looked sullen, arms crossed, staring out the window with an expression that suggested this whole exercise was beneath him. They came inside with the energy of people attending a funeral. Leo dragged his feet, and Mark kept a hand on the boy's shoulder like he might bolt. Thank you for agreeing to this, Emily said stiffly. I nodded but didn't respond. We moved to the living room, arranging ourselves like opposing legal teams. Leo sat between his parents on the couch, while I took the armchair across from them. Mom and Dad positioned themselves as neutral observers near the fireplace. Leo has something he wants to say, Mark prompted, nudging his son. The boy looked at the floor. I'm sorry I broke your guitar. The words came out flat, rehearsed, completely devoid of actual remorse. I waited to see if there was more, but Leo remained silent, clearly believing he'd fulfilled this obligation. Why are you sorry? I asked. Leo looked confused. Because my parents said I have to be. That's not what I asked. I asked why you're sorry. Do you understand what you did wrong? He shrugged. I shouldn't have touched your stuff without asking. Another shrug. The kid genuinely didn't see the problem beyond getting caught. Emily jumped in. He knows it was expensive and that you worked hard to buy it. We've talked extensively about respecting other people's property. Have you? Because he doesn't seem to have internalized any of that. He's apologizing, isn't he? What more do you want? I want him to actually understand. Leo, do you have anything you care about? Video games, toys, anything? I guess, he mumbled. What would you do if someone took your favorite thing and deliberately smashed it while laughing? He thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. I'd be mad. Just mad, not hurt, not betrayed, not devastated. I could just buy another one. There it was. The fundamental disconnect. In Leo's world, everything was replaceable. Because money was infinite. The concept of something being irreplaceable, of having sentimental or historical value beyond its price tag, was completely foreign to him. My guitar was made in 1968, I said slowly. Before your parents were born, before your grandparents were married. It was played by professional musicians in recording studios. It had history and character and a sound that came from decades of being played and loved. You can't just buy another one. Then why did Mark have to pay you $12,000 if you can't replace it? Leo challenged. The kid was smarter than he acted. He found the logical hole in my argument and drove straight through it. Because the money represents the value of what was lost, even if that value can't truly be replaced. Like if someone destroyed your house, insurance would pay you money, but it wouldn't give you back the specific house with all your memories attached to it. We could buy a bigger house, Leo said. Mark closed his eyes in frustration. Emily looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. Even they could see that their son was incapable of grasping the basic concept of sentimental value. This isn't working, I said to Emily. He doesn't understand, and forcing him to apologize isn't teaching him anything. What do you suggest? She asked desperately. We've taken away privileges. We've had him talk to a therapist. We've tried explaining why what he did was wrong. Nothing seems to get through because he's never experienced real loss. Everything in his life is replaceable. Every mistake is fixable with money. Every consequence is temporary. Dad spoke up from his position by the fireplace. When I was Leo's age, I saved up for 6 months to buy a model airplane kit. Took every penny from my paper route. The day I finished building it, my older brother knocked it off the shelf, and it shattered. My parents made him pay for a replacement out of his allowance, but that took him almost a year. A whole year of not being able to buy anything else because he owed me for what he'd broken. He learned real quick to be more careful around other people's stuff. Leo perked up slightly at the story, maybe because it involved actual consequences that another child had faced. Could you do something like that? Mom asked Emily. Make him save or work to understand the value. He's 10 years old. What kind of work could he do? Chores, yard work, helping neighbors, I suggested. Not to pay me back, you already did that. But to learn what effort and time feel like when you're working towards something. Mark drizzled. We're not making our son into child labor. No, you're making your son into someone who destroys other people's property for entertainment. I'm trying to help you fix that before he's old enough for the consequences to involve jail instead of family discussions. The room fell silent. Leo looked between his parents, perhaps sensing for the first time that this was about more than just the guitar. I'm going to leave now, I announced. Mom, Dad, I love you both. I'm sorry this happened in your home, but I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. Dad hugged me tightly. Don't apologize. You did what needed doing. I should have backed you up yesterday instead of staying quiet. Mom joined the embrace. Can we still see you for holidays and birthdays? Of course. I'm not cutting you out of my life, but I won't be attending events where Leo is present until I see genuine evidence that he's learned consequences for his actions. Emily started to protest, but Mark stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. For once, he seemed to understand that pushing further would only make things worse. I drove away from my parents' house feeling lighter than I had in years. The $12,000 wouldn't bring back my guitar, but it would allow me to search for another vintage instrument worthy of my collection. More importantly, I'd established a boundary that had been missing from my family dynamics for far too long. 2 weeks later, Dad called to tell me that Emily had enrolled Leo in counseling. Apparently, his behavior at school had been escalating, and the guitar incident had been the wake-up call his parents needed to recognize they were raising a child with serious empathy deficits. The therapist said he shows signs of conduct disorder, Dad explained, something about lack of remorse and disregard for others' feelings. They're working on it, but it's going to take time. I hope they stick with it, I said honestly. Leo deserves the chance to become a better person. Emily asked if you'd be willing to meet for coffee. Just the two of you. I considered the request. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain distance from a sister who had betrayed my trust so thoroughly. But another part remembered a girl who'd shared a bedroom with me growing up, who'd braided my hair and taught me to ride a bike. Tell her I'll think about it. A month after the Mercedes incident, I met Emily at a cafe downtown. She looked tired, older somehow, as if the past few weeks had aged her. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "You said you wanted to talk." She stirred her coffee nervously. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not just words to make the situation go away." I waited, letting her find her own words. "I've spent the last month in therapy with Leo, and separately in couples counseling with Mark. The therapist asked me to think about why I reacted the way I did when Leo destroyed your guitar. And I realized I've been so focused on maintaining this perfect image, the successful marriage, the luxury lifestyle, the well-behaved child, that I stopped seeing reality. Leo isn't well-behaved. He's spoiled and entitled and completely lacking in empathy. Mark and I created that by refusing to hold him accountable for anything." She took a shaky breath. "When Leo smashed your guitar, some part of me knew it was serious. But admitting that would mean admitting we'd failed as parents. It was easier to blame you for overreacting than to face what our son had become. That must have been hard to realize. It was devastating. But what you did to Mark's car, as much as I hated it at the time, gave me a perspective I desperately needed. You showed me exactly how our behavior looked from the outside." I sipped my coffee, letting her continue. "The therapist says Leo has a long road ahead of him. We've started implementing consequences at home, and he's learning that his actions affect other people. It's not easy. He fights us constantly. Change rarely is easy. I know I can't undo what happened to your guitar. But I want you to know that I see now how wrong I was. Not just about the guitar, but about everything. The way I dismissed your feelings, the way I used family as an excuse for bad behavior, the way I prioritized wealth and status over basic human decency." The apology sounded genuine, spoken with a raw honesty that comes from real self-reflection. "I appreciate you saying that," I told her. "And I hope you and Mark can help Leo become the person he's capable of being. Do you think we can rebuild our relationship, eventually?" I thought about it carefully. "Maybe, but it's going to take time and it's going to require consistent action, not just words. Show me that you've changed through how you live, and we'll see where that leads." Emily nodded, understanding that I wasn't offering immediate forgiveness, but rather the possibility of future reconciliation. It was more than she deserved, and we both knew it. 6 months later, I found a 1965 Gibson J200 at an estate sale in Austin. The seller's father had been a session musician who'd played with some of country music's biggest names. The guitar had been maintained perfectly, and the sound was everything I'd hoped for. It cost me $14,000, but with the money from Mark, plus my savings, I could afford it. I invited my parents to my apartment for a private concert, just the three of us. Dad cried when I played the first song, Mama's Favorite, a tune from my childhood. The music filled the room with warmth and memory, proof that some things destroyed could be replaced, even if the replacement came in a different form. Emily and Leo weren't there, and that was okay. Some relationships needed space to heal, and some lessons took years to fully learn. What mattered was that I'd stood up for myself, established boundaries, and refused to accept mistreatment in the name of family obligation. The new Gibson became my constant companion, accompanying me to charity events and hospital visits where I played for patients who needed beauty in their darkest moments. Each note reminded me that standing up for yourself doesn't make you petty or vindictive. It makes you someone who understands their own worth and refuses to settle for less than basic respect. And if anyone ever asked about the matching scar on both my guitars, the one destroyed and the one that replaced it, I had a story worth telling. Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with family?